The following is a JourneyWise Network production.
He was one of the youngest elected representatives in the state legislature for Tennessee. He went on to start a business career that would take him to the fashion intersections of the world as the CEO of Saks Fifth Avenue. He's also been an interim university president. And among all of those things, he's also been a very faithful follower of Jesus Christ. I'm so excited to be able to have this conversation with my dear friend, author and business leader, Brad Martin. Hey friends, welcome to the You Matter podcast. And we're so excited today to have with us a very dear friend of mine and also a wonderful leader and person of faith, Mr. Brad Martin. Brad, thank you for joining us on You Matter.
Thrilled to. Thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely. And I've long wanted to have a conversation with you about your journey. You and I go back several years now. You were a member at Christ Church and has been a wonderful part of my own journey and a very important part of my journey. I've learned a lot listening to you and watching you. And you and I actually wrote a book together called The Five Stones. And it's one of my most favorite experiences of writing with someone. So Brad and I go way back. Brad, before we get started, can you just give us, for folks who may not know who you are and your story, would you just tell us a little bit about your journey and about your life?
Well, sure. I'll do it in capsule form because that's probably about the attention span people would have for interest in that. But I was born in Ohio. I actually grew up, though, in Memphis, Tennessee, lived in Memphis most of my life. Just moved to Chattanooga a few years ago for our sons to go to school. But Memphis has been my home for 50 years. I went to a public high school, White Station High, went to business school at Vanderbilt, undergraduate school at what was then Memphis State, spent 5 terms as a member of the Tennessee legislature, the House of Representatives, had the privilege of doing that when I was quite young, went into business, did a variety of things. The last was, the last active management role. I was the CEO of a company that had a number of department stores, including Saks Fifth Avenue, did that for about 20 years. The last 15 or so, I've been focused on a variety of other businesses, not-for-profit activity, family, etc. I have 5 sons, 2 grown and 3 teenagers.
Wow, you have a lot on your plate, and of course, your wonderful wife Dina. I always love being around Dina, and I've watched your walk, Brad, over these last 10, 12 years that we've been friends. And I know that your faith is so important to you and it's such an important anchor in your life. Where do you think you matter most in terms of your relationship and in terms of your faith? Where do you think God is using you or has used you most in those relationships?
That's a great question. Probably others could speak to that more objectively than I. I think that when God makes me pay attention, that's a helpful set of circumstances. And as a result, I might then focus on doing something, contributing something, or helping with something that furthers his kingdom and the Christian values. But I think it's I have to make certain that I'm paying attention for that to occur, and God tends to slap me around a little bit when I'm not paying attention to make certain that I refocus a bit.
Well, I know you have a servant's heart, and I know that's part of how you want and love to interact in the world. Are there some things that you're doing right now that are of particular interest in terms of being able to serve and give back?
Well, I think for a number of years, most of my service-oriented focus has been targeted to those who would have been described by Jesus as the least of these. I've been given an enormous amount of privileges and resources and opportunities and capabilities and health, and but that's not necessarily the case for so many. And so it is my interest in seeing if there is something that if I do it or we do it, it really does matter. It really does change things. And so if it's an area where I'm a drop in the bucket, it's not particularly interesting. If it's an area where someone who is really struggling with imprisonment or addiction or health issues or poverty or emotional or behavioral health, if there's something I can do to help, I get really excited about that.
Well, I know one of the ministries that you've really had a heart for recently in the last few years has been those who are transitioning back from incarceration back into the world. And several folks that we connected to through Christ Church have been a part of this wonderful ministry. Can you just tell us a little bit about why that ministry, I think as a perfect illustration of what you were just saying, why does that ministry in particular mean so much?
Well, there's a leader in the Memphis area, Ron Wade, who leads HopeWorks, which is focused on providing services to people who are transitioning out of incarceration and a variety of other things that HopeWorks does as well. But if there's ever been a vulnerable population, that's one of them. And heavens knows, our Christianity is all about forgiveness and giving somebody another chance, right? So I've been involved in supporting what HopeWorks has done to help people understand the challenges of living on the outside after they haven't for a while. And about 5 or 6 years ago, we concluded that one of the things we could do that would be most helpful would be to provide a vocational skill in the prison that when one finished his or her service, they could walk out with a skill for which there's huge demand and that they can make a living wage. So that's what we've done with Hope to Hire. We've graduated 200 something members from the program, fantastic employment rates, very low recidivism. And so there's a great example of a second chance working for people once you put some resources and structure around it.
Brad, one of the individuals that we sent through the program, one of the things they said back to me is they said, I learned that everyone has some place where they failed or missed the mark, but that everyone also has an opportunity to, I can take on this new skill and I can go back into the world and I can contribute. But learning from, and I've heard it from several of the folks who've been through the program, being able to learn from my mistakes and not just feel like that I'm being weighted down or judged by my mistakes, that I'm actually learning from the places where maybe things have not gone well. We all go through that. And so I guess one of the first questions is, I know you're a keen student of life, and you're very particular and deliberate about what you do and how you do certain things. Has there ever been a time in your life where you encountered an intersection of struggle or difficulty that you learned a particularly important lesson for your walk, for your faith?
Oh, I'm sure there are many. I think one is that you're never as good or bad as your press clippings, right?
Sure.
So, the truth is somewhere in between, right? And when everybody loves you, you should remember that's simply not enough, that's transient. When everybody despises you, you should remember that God doesn't.
Yeah.
And so I think just understanding your own self-worth in the eyes of God, and also keeping in mind that it is no greater than or less than anyone else that you might interact with, is something I've tried to do over the years.
Hey, friends, I hope you're enjoying this podcast episode with Brad Martin. Several years ago, Brad and I were talking about different Bible passages that had meant so much to us, and both of us love David and Goliath. As we began to think about and talk about what we had learned from those passages, we discovered that there really was something to the 5 stones that you read about in that passage. We've written a book called The Five Stones. What does it mean to conquer your giants, just like David did with Goliath? And friends, I really believe in this book, and we've seen God work through it. For your donation of $15 or more, we will send you a signed copy of The Five Stones. If you will just send your donation by going to journeywise.network, you can do that on our online donation page, and emailing us at info@morewestcenter.org. We look forward to hearing from you. How important do you think being an example through humility, how important is that in terms of how you lead and manage in life?
I mean, I think it's important, whether you are naturally of that ilk or not. I think it's an important strategy if you want to have influence, right? You're more inclined to follow someone who is humble than someone who is arrogant. Mm-hmm. And so I think it can be an acquired skill, even if you don't naturally begin with that. But I think that I've had plenty of occasions to have to recognize my humility because of failure. And I think that's been a good reminder as well.
Well, we all stumble. We all face crises and things in our lives that I think transform us and make us better. As you went you had a very interesting journey. You didn't say this, you were the youngest person elected to the House of Representatives.
Right. Yes, I was.
At 21, was that right?
Yes.
And then spent 5 terms, and you went from politics into business. Mm-hmm. Were there particular lessons that you learned as a politician that sort of helped you move into that other world, that other role?
I would say perhaps 2 or 3 things. One is just a real love of people.
Sure.
So if you don't find people interesting, enjoyable, fascinating, et cetera, you probably don't want to be in the political business. And
sure.
Now, I wasn't a computer coder. I wouldn't have a clue. I can barely turn one on. So I went in the retail business, which is a people-oriented business. So I think the people side of it were probably pretty similar. Relationships matter in politics. They matter in business. Communication skills. Had to really hone my communication skills in public office in order to get anything done. And I think as a business leader, you have to do the same. So I think clearly some preparation that was transferable. Maybe a little bit easier from politics to business than it is from business to politics, actually.
Well, I was actually going to ask that question. Did you think that because I do know I read an article about you in just the last few days that was written as you were making your switch into the business world, that someone had done a newspaper article. And one of the things they said was your greatest gift was the fact that you seemed genuinely interested in people and that you enjoyed talking to people and getting to know people. I'm finding, Brad, in our world today that technology and in other reasons why we don't have those places where we intersect as often as we should. How deliberate do you try to be in terms of maintaining relationships and making sure that you're remaining? Because it's so easy to become disconnected in today's world.
Right.
How deliberate are you to try to do that with people and your friends and family?
Oh, I think every year when I develop my personal plan for the year, it's right up at the top 10 of. And then somewhere between March and April, I probably already missed the mark in terms of executing to it. So it is important. It's absolutely important. I could be a whole lot better at it. I think one of the things that I'm having to learn is focus. And
Sure.
I think to the extent that I can remove some distractions, that will permit me to do more important things, like make sure I'm in touch with my friends and family more effectively.
When did you know that or really realize how important your faith was? I know that you came from a family of faith. What was that like in terms of the development of your faith walk?
Well, I was thinking about it the other day. It never occurred to me other than to declare, well, of course I'm a Christian, and so are my parents. This is what is expected of me. And so clearly that's how it started out. I think in young life in high school, I understood there was more than just an expectation. There was an opportunity for a relationship, and a relationship that could inspire how you go about your life. And so I'd say probably high school through young life is when the faith portion really started to kick in.
How did you manage, though, as you went from, again, politics and then into business, and you had a real talent for growing business and for being in business, and all of a sudden you find yourself in the center of the fashion world in terms of chairing Saks Fifth Avenue, which is a world that seems sort of distant from Memphis, Tennessee. How did you keep those certain values, though, that you grew up that were important to you in terms of your faith as you kind of moved into different environments, throughout?
Well, I think you have to realize what's transitory and what's permanent. And, for me, I mean, it was a business opportunity. It was a job responsibility. It was fascinating. It was interesting. It was stimulating. It was hard. But it was a commercial enterprise, and it wasn't my life.
Sure.
So I think that was something that I was pretty intentional about making certain, is that my life wasn't my job, or my identity wasn't my business. And it takes some work, actually. It does take some work.
Well, you were apparently, and I've heard you say this, and then I've read this about you, that one of the things that impressed people in that world was the fact that you would fly home on a regular basis to try to be with your two sons at the time, who were younger and growing up. Why was that so important for you? I mean, because your worlds were, it seemed at times, maybe two different places. You were trying to manage that.
Well, I get one was my job, and the other is my family, right? So I just, not unlike a lot of people, I worked most of the time in a different place than where my family lived. And that can be true for a truck driver, it can be true for a bus driver, it can be true for someone who is in the armed services. And so I just looked at it as, hey, I work somewhere else, and when I'm not working, I want to be home. Were there, and because of that very reason, because there are a lot of folks who are in two places like that in their life, were there things that you were particularly deliberate about when you would get home, things that you would or would not do in terms of the other world that was pulling on you and creating stress with you? Were there things that you had to be so deliberate about in that process? Well, I should have been. I probably wasn't very good at it. Should have been very deliberate that, when you're home, and that you're not just there physically, but you're there mentally and emotionally. And I probably, I don't give myself an A marks in that regard. I give myself better marks with my three younger sons, but I also was in a point in life where I was not working quite as intensively as I did back then. So no excuse, and I have a wonderful relationship with my sons, but my guess is they would tell you I showed up, but maybe I was only partially present.
Well, and that's a great distinction, Brad, because I know that in my course of ministry, I dealt a lot with people. You didn't have to be in two different cities to show up and not be present. That could happen, across the street. But one of the things I've always respected about you is you have always been very self-reflective about the places maybe where you were strong and maybe the places where you were not quite as strong. And I love that reflection, because I think everyone should do that. And I've tried to do it as I've watched your example. I feel and I'm doing much better in this year as I'm out of the pulpit and have this whole new direction. But why is that tension so great in a person's journey? And why does it take, like you just said, I think I'm a much stronger father 30 years into it than I was at the beginning. So talk about that tension a little bit, maybe for those who are listening who are in that stage of life right now, and why it's so important to understand that tension.
Yeah, I think there's no, I guess my suggestion is just do your best. There's no easy answer. There's no line of demarcation, but just do your best. If you're working really hard to make a living, to pay the school tuition, to pay the house note, et cetera, I get it. That is hard stuff, right? But for that, your family doesn't have the opportunity or the security or the life that they otherwise would enjoy. So no one should minimize how hard that is. But I would say just be honest with yourself and your family about how can we, in spite of that, do more or be better.
What would you say about then the tension that we often feel between the world we're working in and our vocations and our faith walk? Would you say the same thing as you would between the balance of tension between work and family?
Yes. But I don't think you have to, and I don't think you have to check your faith at the door when you show up at work. I think you just, hopefully the way you work is reflective of the values of your faith. And, but obviously it's a secular world, and most businesses or commercial enterprises are not faith-based enterprises, and you have to just recognize that and consistent with your own North Star, do your job.
Is there a process that you would go through every day in terms of your faith walk, in terms of your connection to your devotions or your reading of the Bible? Were there things that you did consistently that helped you in that journey?
Yes, and it's that early morning time with the Bible, with the devotional book, with the prayer, with the cup of coffee. It's my friend Bill Hybels calls it chair time.
Yes.
It would make me, to this day, it makes me crazy if that is not available to me in the morning. And it clearly would have made me crazy back when I was working all the time.
Did you find that you had to be, because I know you are particular because you have certain tasks that you have to do in the day, and most people who go to work, they have a schedule, they have things they have to do and to-do list. Did you sometimes have to be that deliberate with it? Or were there times that? Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. It was. There were two things that had to be on my schedule in my mind to survive. One was that early morning time for myself, and the second was exercise. And everything else those had to perhaps fit in with everything else, but actually everything else had to fit in with those two.
You've told me before that you had gotten couldn't have made the merger between your profits and Saks before 9/11, and 9/11 was a very important time for you, and in terms of your time in New York. Can you tell us a little bit about that period and what that meant to you?
Yes, so we Saks Fifth Avenue, of course, was headquartered in New York, and our biggest store is in New York, which also represented a lot of our revenues and cash flow, et cetera. On Tuesday, actually on Monday, the 10th, I was in New York, and I came back that Monday to Memphis. Was going on my way to Omaha for another outing that morning when we didn't take off on the airplane. First we were terrified about the implications for our people. We have 1,000 people, had 1,000 people who worked in the store, 1,000 people who worked in the office next door. So the first 24 hours were trying to count for everyone's safety. From there, it was how do we respond with the business, knowing that business is the last thing anybody was thinking about at that point in time. Do we close all the stores out of reverence? Do we open out all the stores out of defiance? And so we concluded, actually, on the 12th, that we would keep the New York store closed for obvious reasons that week. And we opened every other store in the company around America. And we told our employees, if you don't want to come, you don't have to. We understand. But our employees wanted to be in the store to demonstrate to the world that our commercial enterprises and our freedoms would not be cowed by terrorism. And so we didn't have any customers, but we had a lot of employees in the stores for that week.
And y'all did some very special things in the windows, did you not?
Yeah, we have at New York, and we had a Fifth Avenue store has these spectacular display windows that are always beautifully decorated and presented. And we took the windows, even though the store was closed, and built presentations to honor the first responders and to memorialize those who had been killed or injured in the attacks. And that was our way of telling the story, if you will. We used our windows to do so.
Well, I'm glad you bring up the word story, narrative. If someone were going to write a screenplay about Brad Martin's story, what would the title be, and what do you think the focus would be?
First is I wouldn't recommend it because you probably can't sell it. What would the focus be? Maybe the title is He Showed Up.
I love that.
I think that's part of everything, isn't it? Just showing up. And I failed on many occasions, and it's not easy to set yourself up to do it, but I kind of knew that was a possibility and just said, let's go try anyway.
Yeah.
So I think that would be perhaps what I would like to be known for, is just showing up.
Is there anything that your current self that looks back on that 21-year-old about to go into the House of Representatives, is there anything that you would tell that 21-year-old now that you feel would be important to the journey?
That would take a lot of thought. And the answer is, of course, and I'd have to make a long list. But I would also say that, I'm so grateful for having had every opportunity I've had like that. I don't want to second guess any of it. So I would say showed up, did my best, what I had at that point in my life, and hopefully it was of some value.
Well, I can tell you as someone who's just thoroughly enjoyed watching your life, it has been of great value. You need to know that. And you play a wonderful role in people's lives. I one of the best gifts I've ever been given in my life was you introduced me to my childhood hero, Johnny Bench, and did a great job of keeping it a secret from everybody. It was a good night. It was a good night. But I think gratefulness and thankfulness is something that I see in you, Brad, time and again. I think that would be a great thing to say to your 21-year-old, that you're going to have a lot to be thankful for. Enjoy the journey.
Exactly.
Very much. One last question, and we so enjoy you being on this program. But in Matthew chapter 5, Jesus says that you are the salt of the earth and you are the light of the world. What do you think Jesus means by being salt and light?
Well, I think Jesus means that we're made a certain way in the salt, right? And so use it. Jesus created us that way, or God created us that way, and there's a flavor, there's a vibrance, there's an attraction, there's there's a modification, if you will, about your state, and just get on with using it. And I think the Light is, if you are functioning that way, make sure you're doing it so others might see that this is what makes you what you are. That you care about somebody in prison because you care about somebody who's in prison.
Yeah.
And not only don't back away from it, but illuminate that, because that's reflective of your faith.
Sure. Well, that's great. That's a good word. Well, my friend, thank you. This has been a great conversation. I always love talking to you. We don't get a chance to talk as much as we used to, but I certainly pray for you every day, and I thank you for what you're doing. Thanks for this program, too. I know it's going to have a huge impact for so many of us in the days ahead. Well, thank you, sir. We're going to have fun with it. That's the most important thing. So, great. All right. Thank you. Take a moment, if you would, to please hit that subscribe button. And we also need you to do a 5-star rating. And then, of course, we would love a review. We are a ministry of JourneyWise Network, and we would love to hear back from you. So go to journeywise.network and send us a message that we can share. God bless you.